There was a Russian researcher, and his name was Nikolai Kozyrev, and he had created what's called the Kozyrev mirror, which was basically sheet metal that he kind of twisted into itself. And inside the main hole was a mirror. And so he had this theory that matter and time were not separate, but they were together, and that if you can bend matter, you can also bend time. And so he created the Kozyrev mirror. Well, in the 1990s, there were a group of researchers, I believe they were in Siberia, and they were at a top secret facility. They were performing experiments with the Kozyrev mirror. And they're in this top secret facility, they're in this room, it's pitch black. And in the middle of the room was the mirror. And in the middle of their experiments, like one night they were doing something in one of their sessions, and these lights began to manifest, and they were symbols, sigils, if you will, coming out of the mirror. They began to draw and document them. Sometimes they would actually see entities that would interface from the other side of the mirror. This will freak you out. And they looked a lot like Aleister Crowley's lamb. And they would often come to the very surface of the mirror and peer into them as researchers, and they would freak out. And so there were times when the way they described it was that there would be some form of materialized terror that would fill the room to where one gentleman said that it was almost like you could reach out and touch it.
Welcome back. I'm here again with Nathaniel Gillis. Nathaniel, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good, buddy. It's always good to be on your show, and you're one of my favorite people in the field. So I'm glad to be back on with you.
So I'm just going to tell you a quick story because, well, how did this interview come about? Because there was something like minor weird about like the response time, but that you remarked on. But tell me about that, and then I'll tell you a quick story.
So I had an opening, at least this interview, I had an opening, and I'm like, this is really, like, I'm talking the most short notice, right? The shortest notice ever. And so I shot you an email, and then I blinked, and I got an email back, and then here we are. It's awesome.
The last guy that I interviewed?
Mm-hmm.
The last guy? Is he the last guy or the guy before that? I'm not going to say his name. It'll show up in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
He had a dream that he was on my show. I never met him in person before.
Mm-hmm.
Never like interacted directly with him. May have retweeted something that he tweeted, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He told me the next day I IM'd him and invited him to interview on my show.
That's synchronicity times 10. That's crazy.
This stuff happens constantly to me. I don't know why. I don't know what's driving it. I have no idea. It's absolutely... Let me tell you another one today. I was reading Operation Trojan Horse, okay, by John Keel. And I see a name in there. I know the guy.
Really?
He's still alive. He's still around. He was like a famous UFO hoaxer. But
wow.
I'm like...
I know that guy.
This guy. Yeah.
It's never happened to me. That's pretty cool. It had to be a strange feeling. Like, wait a minute.
I might do an interview with him. Although he got canceled from the horror community because, well, I mean, canceled. You can imagine why.
Yeah.
So.
It happens a lot, brother.
Yeah. Anyway. What's new with you?
Well, as we discussed before, this may be, I know it's going to be one of my last interviews for the year. I think I have another one with Jeff Mara in December, but it might even be one of my last. Have you been on that
show, by the way?
No.
You know who was on there today?
Who?
David Icke.
Oh, yeah. Sweet.
And there was no warning panel.
No caveat, little explanation on the bottom. Like, David, I don't.
Yeah, I got that for Fringe, but anyway,
Yeah,
I don't get that for positive, like light and like more positive contactee stuff. I never get it for them, but I get it for
always for the
Fringe.
negative. Yeah,
No, not always, but specifically for her. I don't
she's
know why.
awesome. She's incredible.
She's awesome, but
Love
I
all of her
think
work.
anytime YouTube flags something, that means you're probably close to the target.
Yeah, that's usually true 90% of the time. So yeah, this is definitely one of my last interviews of the year. It may be one of my last interviews ever. Just the research has taken a toll on me, and I'm starting to see where the field is heading, where specifically ufology is heading. And not that I have to like it for it to be validated, right? And all that, but I don't like it. And I don't like to be gaslit. And that's what I see occurring in the field. And you kind of add that to some of the newer research I've been doing, which we discussed in depth earlier with respect to the Kozyrev mirrors. The implications for our species are very, very dark. And it kind of pushed me to stare into the abyss. And I don't know that I want to do that anymore. Like, a part of me would much rather just stock shelves, third shift at a grocery store, and just focus on sports or something lighter instead of constantly having to fend off energies and whatever this phenomenon is. So this may actually be one of my last interviews. I do have a project coming up. If that actually moves forward, then I'll most likely stay in the field for that. But yeah, man, I've got to get my life back.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Bain Books at bain.com.
Okay, so many things there. Kozyrev mirrors. We talked about that, but you didn't talk about that with the audience. Why don't you start with relating that story, and then we can further go into why you're considering kind of walking away.
So there was a Russian researcher, and his name was Nikolai Kozyrev, and he had created what's called the Kozyrev mirror, which was basically sheet metal that he kind of twisted into itself. And inside the main hole was a mirror. And so he had this theory that matter and time were not separate, but they were together. And that if you can bend matter, you can also bend time. And so he created the Kozyrev mirror. Well, in the 1990s, there were a group of researchers, I believe they were in Siberia, and they were at a top secret facility. They were performing experiments with the Kozyrev mirror. And they're in this top secret facility. They're in this room. It's pitch black. And in the middle of the room was the mirror. And in the middle of their experiments, like one night they were doing something in one of their sessions, and these lights began to manifest, and they were symbols, sigils, if you will, coming out of the mirror. They began to draw and document them. Sometimes they would actually see entities that would interface from the other side of the mirror. This will freak you out. And they looked a lot like Aleister Crowley's lamb. And they would often come to the very surface of the mirror and peer into them as researchers, and they would freak out. And so there were times when the way they described it was that there would be some form of materialized terror that would fill the room to where one gentleman said that it was almost like you could reach out and touch it. Like whatever it was so present and so manifest. that they would run out. They didn't know what to do with it. They just knew that they would have their session done. They would go into a new session, a new experiment, and then something would incarnate that would terrify them. And so one of the researchers went on to get a crucifix. He told his superior, I don't know what that is coming out of the mirror, but it's terrifying us. I'm putting crucifix on the doorframe. So one night he does that. He goes into the Kozyrev mirror, and for whatever reason, the terror is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And so he doesn't know what to do. And so he's thinking, I have my favorite philosopher, and this specific philosopher had a favorite. It's called an emblem. It was a design. It's called the emblem of peace, sigil, or the banner. Sigil. There we go. Yeah. He called it the banner of peace, and it was a circle with 3 other circles in the middle. And so he thought to himself, I have one at the house. I'm just going to go pick it up, and I'm going to bring it back into this room. I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to place it in front of this Kozyrev mirror, hoping, here's the key point, that my good intentions will help push these beasts back into the darkness. So it was. He goes back home, gets the symbol, he places the banner, the symbol of peace, in front of the Kozyrev mirror. And lo and behold, the terror doesn't leave. It doesn't dissipate. It actually gets stronger. It was in that session that they decided to just pack up shop, close the session down. We're done. They get up to leave. One guy gets a cigarette. So they walk out of the building. And on their way to their cars, a gentleman, he was a security guard, pulls them aside and says, look, I don't know what you're doing in that facility, but there has been a silver metallic object hovering over that building for the last 2 hours. So that researcher then goes home with his symbol, and he's thinking over and over again, there's something not right with this situation, right? Not only did the terror do everything but materialize in that room, not only was it profound and present, and not only it got stronger, it got compounded, and it kept getting stronger, and it didn't make any sense. I'm doing the right things. I have the crucifix. I have the symbol. And so that's when he started to kind of go down the lineage of this symbol, right? Like, okay, I know I was told it's the banner of peace, but what is it really? Is it possible that it's not the banner of peace at all, and that this philosopher was given a symbol or a sigil that he himself was completely ignorant of? And so this researcher, he had a pilgrimage, man. He went into the depths, and he realized through his research that this was a sigil that wasn't an emblem of peace. It was from Haiti, and it was a voodoo sigil. And that the phenomenon, and this is what I'm talking about when I say that it's conjuring us to conjure them, the phenomenon had manipulated his very intentions, convinced him, oh, this is a symbol, this is what it does, this is where it's from. If you match that with all of your good intentions, you will have the desired outcome. In the midst of all of that, he now places a sigil from voodoo in front of the mirror. And whatever life form was on the other side of that mirror, whatever that was, had manipulated him into manifesting a sigil that he had no concept of. This is the danger of CE5, the danger of the conjuring, the idea that my intentions with them will determine their intentions with me. Never made any sense to me. Is this making sense? Never did, because it's not supposed to. And by the time that researcher realized what was going on, it was too late. This is an emblem of peace. Right. And so the phenomenon had literally contoured his own consciousness, led him to believe these certain traditions, certain ideas. But at the end of the day, it was just drawing him in, and it was too late. And so my point here is that there are life forms that will manipulate us into believing that, oh my God, if I have the best of intentions with them, this desired outcome will occur. They will be nice to me. It's never been true. It's always been manipulation. And my point here, I guess, with this is that the leading researcher in that facility basically washed his hands from the research. He said, I'm done with it all. No more experiments. I'm getting out of the field entirely. And he actually told his government, he actually kind of waved a red flag, and he said that his deepest regret was opening the portal, number one. And number two, he was the most worried that the military industrial complex would weaponize whatever technology was in that mirror and use it against us and against other countries. Now, what was his point? His point was that it was not a weapon, it's a portal. In that, again, the phenomenon would have convinced us, right? That is, yeah, sure, it's technology, not realizing, no, it's a way for them to incarnate into our reality in whatever they are. They're more knowledgeable about the sigils they're handing us. And we may be in the dark on a lot of this. And I don't want to ramble, but that's primarily where I'm at.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Now, why are you hesitating to continue in the field? Like, what specific things are you worried about happening?
What I'm picking up right now in the field is that there's a faction in the community that wants to gaslight people who are doing the kind of research I'm doing, which is studying ancient idolatry and kind of connecting it to the modern UFO phenomenon. These are individuals that they want to build high places. They want to build altars. They want to propagate the prophecies given to them by these entities. They want to worship them in a way. And they'll do all that. They'll literally appropriate religious artifacts and then come back and tell us there's no religion here. Nothing to see here, folks. In that gaslighting, there's another kind of nuance baked into it, and that is that this is entirely separate than other entities, other life forms we've seen in history. And I'm here to tell you it's not. It's not. I mean, when we have physicists that are just skirting around the scientific method and they know, sure, you can get a response out of that sometimes, but they want an altar built. That's a problem for me. That's a problem for me. And I know we talked about this earlier, but we need to understand that, of course, we could talk about the ancient concept of these life forms to say, okay, they've always been present. But let's look in the 1950s and 1940s. The very first time these non-human intelligences manifested, they manifested in seances. George Hunt Williamson created a homemade Ouija board and channeled them until multiple voices came out of his body. Okay. Albert Bender creates an altar in his attic. There's a reason that's occurring. And what frustrates me the most is that I'm starting to see people in the field who will do all of the above and then have the audacity to look at people like me and others and say, yeah, but you guys are crazy for believing this is supernatural. No, we're not. Right? We study this phenomenon from antiquity to modernity, and we understand it a little bit more than people think we do. And so that's where I'm coming from. And I'm starting to see this kind of shape in the community, and it's incredibly dangerous because some of the entities we've encountered in seances have played every archetype. I'm the guide. I'm the ghost, right? I'm the deceased ancestor. And over and over and over again, by virtue of their behaviors, we've snuffed them out. It was not Ted Rice's grandfather. It wasn't, right? Ted Rice's grandfather materialized allegedly to him. I shouldn't say allegedly, but I say that because it wasn't his grandfather, right? It wasn't his grandfather. And likewise, a lot of these guides that are incarnating, they're not guides either. What it appears that the phenomenon is weaponizing these archetypes against our species. And now, as we're talking, as we're speaking, there is this interloping of necromancy and sorcery being reincorporated in ufology. And I have to say this too, guys. It's not my imagination. It's not like Nathaniel just making this up. I'm not. Like right now, there's a parapsychological conference going on in Germany. I told you about this. And their goal is twofold. Number one, they're going to have an experiencer who, quote, will vacate their own body to allow a non-human intelligence to wear them as an avatar or, quote, a vessel. But that's not supernatural. Now, why isn't it supernatural? I'll tell you why. Because they say it isn't. There's no proof. They just say it isn't, right? I mean, if we can convince people that the entities we knew through seances are different than the entities we're getting through seances, right? No, it never made sense because it's not meant to. It's playing, right? It's literally, it's gaslighting us. It's frustrating because not only is that happening in the field, now we have people who are performing necromancy in order to contact aliens. What? When has that ever been a thing? Again,
wait, who's doing that?
The same conference.
How? I'm afraid to ask. How are they using necromancy to contact non-human intelligences?
This again. See, what we're realizing now is there are people that are wanting to have their cake and eat it too. They want all of the trappings of religiosity and tradition, sanctity, right? I'm going to modify my diet. I'm going to prostrate myself before them. I'm going to build an altar. I'm going to do everything they want me to do, right? And then I want to tell everybody else they're crazy if they think I'm doing stuff that came from antiquity, right? No. And here's what's fascinating to me. They're doing this for a reason, right? Physicists are doing this for a reason. They're not doing this because the scientific method says, hey, listen, I want you to go out there and do this ritual. No, they're doing this because they realized this is what the phenomenon wants. And there are people that have to make up for that, right? They have to have an explanation. I mean, imagine an agnostic or an atheist who's like, I don't even believe in this stuff. But you have to build an altar for them. So what's the best way I can justify it? Well, I'm going to go around telling everybody else, you're crazy for thinking this has connections to the supernatural. I'm not the one. You're the one that's nuts, right? Right. It blows my mind because this is, again,
both could be true, right? Like what we call supernatural could just be some aspect of quantum mechanics that we just haven't wrapped our heads around quite yet, right? Like the principle of non-locality, the principle of quantum coupling is kind of what but that's not the right word. Where you can have instantaneous communication across, regardless of distance, things like that. And maybe it's just an aspect of that reality that we don't quite understand yet. But regardless, there is a metaphysical aspect to this, however you want to define it.
Absolutely.
I think that's the only thing I can say with near certainty. It's just, how's that defined and what is manifesting it? Is it us?
Correct.
Is it some proto-intelligence that's kind of steps out from outside of space and time? The Whitley Strieber has an interesting conception of this, because if we operated outside of space and time, or space-time, we would lack novelty, right? Because presumably you would be everywhere all at once, and there would be no time. So you would know the past, present, and future simultaneously. So you would know everything. You would be all, see all. And that might be pretty interesting for about a millisecond. But since there's no time, you lack the novelty of self-discovery. You lack the novelty of learning, right? So, again, what I think Strieber would say is there's something about us that they can't have or they don't have
Yes.
this novelty, right? And that goes into, I think, your conceptions of the human as avatar to a parasite, to like a non-temporal parasite, basically.
Yes, yes, absolutely, my friend. And it connects to necronetics, which is the earliest incarnation of the phenomenon, where, and again, we're seeing it literally with our own eyes right now in eternity, where our ancestors believed that they were not just building altars, but they were building altars not to gods, but to deceased ancestors, to people that have crossed over, and that there was this symbiotic relationship between how we remembered them, how we kind of parroted their belief systems. There was a relationship between how we did that and how they have the ability to manifest. Very strange stuff. I was talking to Barry Fitzgerald about that this morning, where a lot of the sigils that I've been catching on people's skin and just even in homes, that they weren't first witnessed in magic or ritual magic at all. They were first witnessed by virtue of ancestral worship. And so those symbols were then later taken and kind of reincorporated into rituals. It's fascinating. And then through the ritual itself, the incantation, they would incarnate. And so I guess what I'm saying here, guys, is if we are to consider the fact that these altars are being built for a reason, that these are literally, they're called high places. If that is happening right now, and it is, if necromancy is now being used as a tool to communicate with an HI, it's our responsibility to be intellectually honest and to say, okay, then we have to look at necromancy itself. Where did that originate? Right? And what does it all encompass? What's going on here? And in doing that, you're going to get right back into the occult. You're going to get not just, okay, Aleister Crowley and Parsons and Kenneth Grant. No, you're going to get back in antiquity and start asking these questions like, what was that? Like, what were we even communicating with?
What specifically are people doing with necromancy? Are they like digging up dead bodies and like making offer? Like,
well,
what are they doing?
It appears, at least, I think some of that's happening, but I think that's more closed door. I think behind closed doors, rather. I think what's happening now is a lot like what Sybil Leek did when the Collins elite went to her house, where it's just channeling and allegedly it's the ghost, right? Oh, it's my deceased ancestor.
Okay, so talking to the dead. Right. The dead, summoning the dead, right?
And yeah, absolutely. And so within that dynamic, though, it presents certain problems. I mean, then we have to say, okay, can we trust them? Like, because we know for a fact that they know when people will die. They know what kind of clothes people die in. They have access to that knowledge. So how easy would it be for them to play the role of the dead, right? And so this is what I'm talking about when I say they weaponize archetypes. And, they went through all the archetypes, the guide, right? The Jesus, the Muhammad, the uncle, the grandpa, all of it. What I'm realizing is that we've been able to vet them. We've pierced the veil over and over and over again. And it's almost like the phenomenon's updating itself. It's creating a new archetype to interface with us. I liken it to a case study I had, and we just talked about this earlier, where a woman, she had been taken by these entities as a child. And so she's a little girl. She's watching her favorite cartoon. She's reading Archie comic books. And they would manifest as that favorite cartoon. And so that's the archetype. 808. Yeah, buddy. They would manifest as that archetype. And so they would use that to kind of contour her consciousness and get her to kind of do whatever they wanted her to do. And so years went by, they never manifested. So she's at home, she's maturing, she's getting taller. Well, one day they actually manifest again, and now she's taller than them, and they're still using that same old archetype. And now she said, I'm realizing that this can't be the cartoon, because I'm old enough to realize this isn't a cartoon. This is something that wants to appear as a cartoon. And so this is fascinating. She said in that moment, its eyes started moving back and forth, and it began measuring her belief in the archetype it was wearing. Strange. And so it was fascinating, because it was in that case study. She said that like for a fleeting moment, she's realizing it was trying to update its archetype. and it had nowhere to go. And so that's when she's like, that's when they just disappeared and left and never came back. My point is, in the past, the phenomenon has used these archetypes to deceive over and over and over again, to the point where, like, there's a sharing of information, to where, like, there are experiences happen at Tet Rice where they're abducted, a negative thing happens to them, they're assaulted or something really bad, and then they go to the guide archetype and say, hey, listen, you've been here my whole life, right? Can you give me some insight? And he's no longer there. Can I tell you why? It's because they're the singular intelligence that's diversified itself in our eyes. There was no guide. That was a program superseded by the newest archetype of the phenomenon. Now, this is the modern program that's operating in our species. And so what I'm looking at here, again, is the weaponization of archetypes and the idea that we need to realize that we're being manipulated. In the midst of all the manipulation, again, that there are certain nuances that stick out that are interreligious, cross-cultural, no matter what archetype it is, right? And that's what we're seeing. Let me kind of circle back. That's what we're seeing now in ufology. Okay, yeah, it's the altars. Why? Because it really didn't matter if it's right. If it's not necromancy. No, it's now extraterrestrials we're building altars for. So the altars are consistent, and that's what I'm seeing now in the field, and it grieves me because the same people that have been telling me for years, right? You don't need to study demonology. There's nothing to it. These are not demons. It's like, okay, but where did you get the idea to build an altar at? You can't, like, honestly, I feel gaslight. You can't gaslight me because I know the research. I know what I'm talking about to a degree. I hope to. And so I know enough at least to say, look, yeah, you can't tell me it has 4 tires and a steering wheel, but it's not a car, right? It's got an engine. You know what I mean? It's a Ford Taurus, but it's not a car. No, I'm not stupid. Like there's something here. And what I'm noticing is that these people are literally doing all of this and then turning back around and looking at us and saying, you're the crazy guys for saying that this has anything to do with religion. Anyways, that's my little rant.
How are these people building altars? Like what specifically are they doing?
It varies, brother. Stones, specifically rocks.
They're piling up stones?
Yes. Now, this is fascinating because in the world of the occult, and I'm not talking about like the modern occult, but like the occult of antiquity, they have altars, they have sigils, they have entities that had their own kind of persona and practice and traditions. And so what I'm seeing, though, here, even specifically within demonology and ufology, is that there is a common theme that transcends all of it. And that is sorcery. Over again. People are going to say, you know what, Nathaniel, you're painting it in a negative light. I don't care. I don't care if it's bad or good. My main point here is that it is sorcery. And it's not ours. It's theirs. And so, and I don't want to ramble, but that's where I'm at. And that's why I'm kind of backing out of the field slowly, because I'm now realizing that we have not evolved and that they are primeval. They're doing the same things. And that at a certain time right now, what they're doing is they're trying to get away with it all while convincing us and other people in the field that research what I do. They're trying to convince us that we're out of our minds. And it's not true. I mean, I'm not out of my mind all the time, at least.
Are you worried about anything? Like, are you worried about getting too close to what the nature of this proto-intelligence is and being harmed by it?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, there have been multiple occasions when the phenomenon has threatened me, and it's not, I'm not saying that because I'm trying to like make myself bigger than I am or anything. That's stupid, but yeah, where, I had 2 emails that came to me one night. It said, both of them said the same thing. My guides, there's the archetype, right? My guides told me to tell you that they'll be waiting for you when you die. then I had an experience that I used to work with Dr. Carl Turner. He's been following my research as of late. And it's funny, like he works in a factory, I think, and wherever he works, he gets all of his friends, like they'll watch my shows and stuff. And so like, he's got like 15 people. One of them, I think, came to see me lecture at the Awakening in the UK. But anyways, he messaged me one day and he goes, Nathaniel, he goes, I have to share this with you. I'm like, all right, what's going on? He said, last night, I think it was a dream. He said an entity came to him just like they did in the past, in abductions. He said it was identical. And they told him, you need to stop looking into Nathaniel Gillis. And you need to stop referring his research to people. Don't even mention his name. So if you combine that in me having that knowledge that, yes, the phenomenon has the ability to push back and to adjust. They literally threatened Barbara Bartholic. We're going, what did they say? You're due for an adjustment.
Take the Adjustment Bureau.
Absolutely, brother. So I kind of take that
which, by the way, Bledsoe has been on record as saying, either Bledsoe or Semivan, that is a model of reality that has been seeded into Hollywood to potentially enlighten people.
Yes, we had that discussion too earlier, right? It's Dark City. It's Westworld. But
Matrix,
you know what?
Right.
Absolutely, buddy. And I took all of that into consideration, and I added to it, like, knowing where this is heading. This is not, again, we want to say it's new, right? This is a modern life form. They just showed up and we had nuclear weapons. That's not true, right? It would be different if we were just putting a chair out for them and they're sitting down. But when you're building altars, and again, I'm going to harp on this. I'm going to beat a dead horse. It's going to be verbose, so bear with me. When you have agnostics and atheists, when you have physicists that could care less, they have thrown the scientific method to the wind, and they're building altars. We really need to reconsider if this is actually a modern phenomenon, because altars aren't modern. Those go all the way back to northern Syria, which, by the way, was included in necromancy. They were included in sorcery, ritual magic. So we can argue for days on if it's good or bad. I don't really care. I do to a certain degree, right? But that's not my main point. My main focal point here is we need to be intellectually honest and say, okay, yeah, we need to reconsider some things, because there's a big issue here. If they're aliens, why would they want to be worshipped? Why is it that we first encountered them in seances where they were literally building their own bodies up from the ground, and they were telling us, right, their very first incarnations, that they were our guides? Not alien at all.
Tell the specific story from the skull. So this is basically what shut it down, right?
Yes. So in 1990s in England, there was a group, and a group of parapsychologists, and they had what's called the skull experiment. And the skull experiment in the 1990s, group of
yeah. Okay, keep going.
Group of parapsychologists got together and they went into these mini experiments, actually. And their goal was to hopefully contact people who were on the other side. And so they had incredible manifestations. Balls of light, orbs, materializations where you could actually reach out and touch them. Balls, like just balls of light that would land on the table. Sometimes there was rumor, I can't confirm this, but like small UFOs or something, like, circular balls.
Steve Mira has talked about that. Yeah.
Yep. Love Steve. He's awesome. And so in the middle of these experiments, they were in a seance, lights are off, and out of the corner of their eyes, like, they see this white form take shape. And it begins to build itself from the ground up. And they're watching this. And by the time it incarnates, it looks down and it calls the name of one of the psychics. And he says, "Hi, I'm your guide." And then it just started laughing and talking to them. And when it did, it filled the room with almost like a primal fear. to where it triggered their fight or flight motion. They were, oh my God, whatever that is, we don't want it here. And they turn the lights on and shut the whole thing down. And that's where we were being groomed by the proto-intelligence. Now, the same phenomenon that was incarnating as apparitions and seances, communicating through Ouija boards. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the show, but even George Hunt Williamson, right? He was channeling it, and multiple voices were coming out of his mouth at the same time. I had a case a lot like that. It was a murder case of a woman that was possessed. Weird how they're supposed to be separate, but why are they separate? Oh, that's right. Because we're being told they are. It's dangerous again, to just, anyways. So my point here is that, yes, we first encountered them in seances, at altars, right? By virtue of necromancy and sorcery. And so my point is now it's leaning into the newest archetype, and it wants all of the same trappings. Still wants to do necromancy, still wants to do ritual magic, still wants the altars. But it wants you and I to call it alien, an extraterrestrial. What? No. There's something to this. It's primeval. It's ancient. And the proto-intelligence itself, I've actually caught it carving amulets from underneath the skin to the surface. Now, let's kind of break this down. The remote viewer I was working with, right? The phenomenon was grooming him by virtue of the guide archetype. I'm your guide. We are your guides. But when he encountered them the last time, they weren't his guides at all. Just like Ted Rice, right? They used that to contour his consciousness, to moderate his behavior. And by the time he realized what was going on, it's too late. And when they put him back in his body, now they carved their sigils, just like the sigils, right, that was discovered in the Kozyrev mirror. So what are we dealing with? Again, it's like, okay, forget all the archetypes, trash them all. The base note of this, at its truest, purest source, it is sorcery. What we would call sorcery. And it's important to understand that. And it's vital to approach it as a phenomenology. And with that, I should say, we need to understand that when we did encounter them in seances, the first thing they would do was dominate. Philip experiment. Okay? When they created a ghost, he manifested, he incarnated, and he hit all of the archetypes, all of them. Oh, yeah, I'm telling you who I am, right? Oh, yeah, I had this job. He goes through them all, and then in the midst of confirming what they created for him to confirm, he instantly calls out a female there. Boom, calls her by name and says, listen, you need a new car, don't you? Demonstrates knowledge he shouldn't have. We've seen it over and over and over again. Now, the problem is all of the older archetypes have deceived us. And we know that. We can't trust them all. And so what it's done now, it's exactly what that entity tried to do with the experiencer. I am trying to incarnate as a new archetype. I can't be the same old archetype anymore. I have to update. I have to evolve. And so now it is. And the problem I'm having here, and it's frustrating, it's just, again, it's like, do I even want to do this anymore? Because now the same people that are saying, yeah, they're not A, B, and C, but they are communicating through Ouija boards. They're not A, B, and C, but yeah, they are, right? Those are the same people that are wanting to perform all of these rituals, that are now looking at people like me and saying, yeah, but you're out of your mind if you think that these are anything other than aliens. I'm not having it, man.
Yeah, I think the more you look into it, the moment you say, I know exactly what this is, you don't know what you're talking about.
No. And people have asked me that, like, well, Nathaniel tells, he doesn't know. And it's like, well, of course, right? That's kind of a pet peeve. Yeah, I don't know what these things are. I don't know what they are. And I'll tell you that. What I'm looking for are behavioral patterns. And yes, they're here. And whatever they are, wherever, whenever they are, they respond to certain rituals. And our scientists realize that. Forget everything else. This is what they want. And it's the same thing they've wanted since antiquity.
Well, apparently, a lot of the major aerospace companies in the 1950s were like the Bell Company, I think, is an example. Like the company that invented the Bell helicopter, all that stuff. They were using seances to get technology.
Right.
I don't know where the source of that was. It may have been Steve Mera, but I'd have to check. But this is a new thing.
No, it's not. And it goes back to the Russian scientist, right? He said, okay, yeah, it's cool technology, but do you really understand what it is? Because the implications for our species is disturbing to me. And again, I'm not saying they're demons. Like my model of phenomenon, I don't think they're demons at all. I think that's just been another manipulation, another archetype. But whatever they are, there is, sorcery involved. But it's just like that Russian scientist said, sure, we got technology, but that's not a weapon. That's a portal. I mean, even to the point, guys, where in one of their sessions, one of the entities that Crowley called an Enochian entity step in and stare at them on the other side. And what grieves me the most is that this phenomenon, it's covering its tracks. If it can convince us that, oh, yeah, it's modern, oh, yeah, it's new, oh, or even that it's alien extraterrestrial, then now it no longer has to answer for all of the other times throughout history that it manifested by virtue of Ouija boards, seances, and altars. All of that's separate. Now, right, I have a new identity. And again, it's not just diversifying its identity in our eyes, it's diversifying its timeline. I don't have to look at incubi victims because that's a separate intelligence. Okay, but then why do we have virgins in the Middle Ages, men who are being abducted and being given a child and saying, this is your child, and they're going back to their physicians and saying, we got a problem. I'm a virgin. It seems kind of like the UFO abduction phenomenon. But again, so the phenomenon, again, this intelligence it's wanting all the trappings, everything, all the religious artifacts, but none of the responsibility for all of the other case studies that say, hey, listen, you kind of did some really messed up things to people. For instance, I know I talked about this with you earlier. We're talking, okay, ufology is now trying to redefine orbs. Oh, they're orbs. Right. Though, okay, ufology is now trying to redefine what orbs are. Now, if we're going to take that into consideration, then we have to go to Dr. Barry Taft's research. We have to go to the San Pedro haunting with Jackie Hernandez, where an apparition, hello, Chris Bledsoe, an apparition incarnated, a corpuscular ball of light was just moving like this. They cornered it in a room, and it went. And in the corner, again, this is fascinating, there is an apparition that is now animated, and it's looking around at them. And Dr. Barry Taft said that when it manifested, half of his research team hit the ground. They fainted instantly. Now, it's in that same case study that they collected human blood plasma pouring out of their cupboards. Now, again, here we are again being gaslit. These orbs are different. They're way different, even though we're being told that beings are coming out of them. Where do we first see that? In hauntology, in parapsychology. But again, now we're literally witnessing the entity with the experiencer. Now the phenomenon's updating. That's something else entirely. This is me now. It's insane. And I'm to the point now, brother, where I'm seeing this form in the field, and people are so almost religious about it. The writing's on the wall for me, because these altars were first called high places, and the deities called themselves the Most High. Literally, their identity was tethered defined by the status of the altars built for them. What are we thinking here, brother? What are we thinking? I'm not going to be gaslit. Again, if I have to go stock shelves and just get my mind off of all of this, I will. But dude, I've done too much research to be told there's nothing here. Just move on. No.
There's definitely something here. It's just, what is it? How does it operate?
Right.
All of it's elusive.
Very much so. And I guess what I'm trying to say here for everybody who has to deal with my stupid ADHD is it's not modern. It's a modern incarnation. But the incantations are ancient. And it doesn't want us to believe that. Again, I'll have all the trappings. Dude, furnish it all for me. And then I just want to be an alien to you. Just call me an extraterrestrial. And they're all crazy. No, because if we look at the behavioral patterns, if we look at the pathologies demonstrated by them throughout the years, not good. And so in a way, it's trying to edit its behavior in our eyes. Anyways.
Are there any positive aspects of this thing? Like the equivalent to angels as opposed to things that have demonic-like properties?
Well, this is an interesting conversation. So some of the sigils that I've found, specifically with remote viewer, I compared and contrasted them through some of the grimoires I have in my office here. The closest, one sigil was an Egyptian hieroglyphic arching over his chest. They witnessed it from underneath the skin. An Egyptian hieroglyphic all the way to the surface. Crazy stuff. But the only thing I found on that was angel magic, and it was brought out by a Brahmin the Mage.
Oh,
he practiced it, yeah. Yeah, it's Elizabethan
like
magician.
Like the Enochian language that John Dee basically invented. Well, they didn't invent it. He was given it.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the closest thing I have to it, because there's nothing like it here in the field. We don't have practitioners doing what they're doing. And this is what I struggle with, because I grew up evangelical. When people hear I'm a demonologist, they think, right? Because a lot of people don't watch my shows, or they'll see a snippet of it and they'll project what they think my model is on me. So they think I'm thinking they're all demons. I'm not saying that, that, man. But I believe these are sorcerers. And a Brahmin the Mage encountered one of these beings in his travels. And it was the only entity, again, he was working all kinds of stuff. And it was the only entity he had encountered that was incorporating these same symbols together. Right? And so he found an Egyptian hieroglyphic used in one of the rituals. And even a Brahmin the Mage, my friend, said, I'm not touching that. Whatever that is, right? It's different than what we have. Whatever that is, you ready for this, guys? It wants an altar built. So in my model of the phenomenon, I do believe that at least some of these entities are manipulating reality by virtue of sorcery. And I use the word only because that's it's a vehicle meaning. That's the closest model I have. And I think that's exactly why they want altars built in their names. They're operating with their sigils, right? And even with the Kozyrev mirror, that's called scrying. That goes all the way back to antiquity. John Dee and Edward Kelly were scrying, right? Scrying. Once again, here we go. They were scrying.
Which is kind of a cousin of remote viewing.
Absolutely, brother.
Yeah.
In the middle of their scrying sessions, they would often see metallic objects flying through the room with little men staring at them, just like the Kozyrev, right? They went outside the facility. There's a UFO. And so what we need to realize is that sure, we can sit there and sink our teeth into the possibility that we are in full control. I would suggest we're not. I would suggest that within the dynamic of the altar building, the dynamic of the conjuring, that we're the ones being conjured. In that, just like the Kozyrev mirror, and just like their experiments, that there's a life form on the other side that is allowing us to believe this is a symbol. Okay, put that in front of the portal. and watch what they do with it. And another thing, and I guess I'll shut up here in a second, but what that means for us is that it's possible that we have been allowed to believe in symbols that are not ours. It's theirs. It's possible that there's a reason why the cross doesn't work. In that they're literally manipulating reality by weaponizing our own ignorance and allowing us to believe, oh, sure, we're in charge of the mirror, and we're not. There's something on the other side that's saying, come closer, and you're going to perform this. You're going to conjure me.
Wasn't the swastika like an ancient symbol of peace?
Yes, there's one.
And
absolutely.
The Nazis adopted it, and we all know how that went.
So, yeah, it just grieves me because, I've seen cases like this before where, my God, over and over again, where these beings would say, I want an altar built. You know what comes after altars, my friend? Sacrifices. This is literally authoring its own mythology right before our eyes, and the people who are being silenced are the people who are coming out and telling the truth. Hey, maybe we really need to ask deeper questions here. Right? Where are they getting the blood that was dripping from the cupboards? If it is the proto-intelligence, where are they getting the blood plasma dripping from the cupboards?
It's a good question. Where are they getting it?
Right. So my point here, for those who can't tell I have ADHD, I'm just rambling. I think that as a collective, we need to sit back and start having a deep, we need to analyze more. We need to have deep analysis. And that's pretty much why I'm like, you know what? I want to get out. I see where it's going. People like me and others that are doing the research I'm doing, if and when we come out and say, hey, listen, we need to take a step back and reconsider this, done. I've had shows where I've said that the guy in charge watched it and canceled it, threw it out. It was on for like a day or two, and then they threw it out and deleted it. Why?
What, a podcaster?
Yeah. But why would they do that? I'll tell you why they're doing that. I'll tell you why they're doing that. Because the phenomenon doesn't want to be questioned. It wants to do what it wants to do, and it wants us to feel like we're crazy for questioning. Yeah, I want my altar, but
why am I able to get away with it?
I don't know. No. But yeah, I did a podcast a while ago. Well, like way early in the year. Went deep, went through mythology, the phenomenology of antiquity, modernity, all of it for hours. Like it was 2 different sessions, 2 different shows. And then the guy in charge of the channel shut it down.
Did he shut it down, or did YouTube remove it?
Oh, he shut it down.
Did he tell you why?
No, but I don't really care, Honestly, I'm to the point now where reading the tea leaves, we don't have time. And
that's kind of what the Collins Elite people were saying. There's kind of an eschatology or eschatological element to it.
Yeah. And, like I told you before, brother, I don't agree with everything the Collins Elite taught or even some of their conclusions. But I don't think that people are fully appreciating the danger. See, the Collins Elite, their problem with remote viewers was not that they were remote viewing. There's a lot of people in the field that want to kind of obfuscate that, right? They just want to muddy the waters, and I've seen it all over Twitter or X. Like, it's hilarious to me. Like, they'll throw stuff out there and see if it sticks. People are like, oh man, that makes sense. It's like, no, it doesn't. Right? You know what I mean? If they were really validating their own theology, they wouldn't shut it down, right? They would go to every religion and say, listen, here's disclosure. We're right. You're wrong. They didn't do that. That goes over people's heads because it doesn't fit the narrative. They didn't say, hey, listen, by the way, our God's God. Your God's Satan. That's called evangelism, like literally built into their religious creed. They would have done that. They didn't. They went back against the very grain of their religion and began to keep the Mosaic law. They kept Torah. Doesn't sound very evangelical to me. No. It's my little rant too, man. It's like, I hear it all the time. I'm like, dude, that no. But my point here is that they were not against remote viewing. What happened was they encountered a group in our government who, again, the illusion of power, they try to remote view the entities. And not only did the entities realize that they were being looked into, they reversed the curse. Now they're remote viewing the remote viewers. And so the call-ins are like, wait a minute, there's a problem here. Like, dude, they're ruining your lives. Anyways, but I think it's kind of a mixture of burnout and knowing full well where the phenomenon's taking us. And again, it wants to do everything it's always done, but it wants us to call it by a different name. Different incarnations, same incantations. And in that way, disclosure has happened. Disclosure happened in antiquity. We just didn't know what we were looking at.
Any final words for the audience?
Well, they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game. It's probable that just like the Kozyrev mirror and the researchers in that facility, that even the amulets we think belong to us, even like the amulets and symbols we believe in, they may not at all be what they appear to be. They may be manipulating us by virtue of these sigils to where, sure, it's one thing to us, completely different to them. So that's where I'm at. But thank you so much for having me on, brother. I've been rambling, dude.
It's always good to have you on. You're not going away. You're not going to go away. You got to cover the good side. I think everything has.
I would love that.
That's where I've been. If there's one consistency about this channel, it's all about the duality of reality, right?
Yep.
So you can't have good without evil. As above, so below. As within, so without. Right?
Absolutely, brother. So sorry you guys had to put up with me, man. My ADHD gets the best of me, and I just squirrel.
Audience loves you, and you have like a fan club. You have like a sub fan club on my channel. So
sweet.
Anyway, you
All
see
right.
it in the comments. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep. All right, brother. Thank you so much for having me on, guys. You guys have a good night.
Thank you, brother.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of a expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's buy me a coffee, which is a separate site. And there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.